And we're live. You're listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show.
Hosted by Brandon Davenport, aka It's Brandon D.
How's it going, everybody? Another week. We're rocking and rolling. Good morning. Got some comments coming in. Let's go. I love this comment too. Digital cat meows. That's what the theme song sounds like. I can hear it. I can hear it for sure. I made the theme song myself on GarageBand on my phone. Lots of people have been asking me to do like an NFT or something like that for the show. So who knows? Hashgraph Enthusiasts is live every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on X, YouTube, LinkedIn. It's a party. If you're watching, share with your friends. This week's episode, we've got Brian from Hashpoint on the show. A lot of people have been very excited about the new Hashpoint platform. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Let me see here. I've got it. Look at this thing. So we've got the Hashpoint IO platform out now. I was actually just playing around with it a little earlier, but new dashboard. People are very excited about it. All sorts of different things like revenue, network data, some more interesting stuff like, governing council, like a breakdown of the council. And then also this valuation model, which is like blowing my mind a little bit. It gives you, it gives you a look at what Hedera price could look like, or what HBAR price could look like in the future based off of this kind of equilibrium curve, and changing some of these parameters. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff. I want to get, Steve will be on the show soon, in probably just about half an hour. And we'll chat about Hashpoint, kind of what it's all about, why it was created, and a little bit behind the scenes, because I think a lot of people are curious about it. And if you have any news that you want me to dive into, leave a comment on the stream and I'll check it out, or any questions or anything like that. I think it's gonna be a good one. So quick little things just off the top, man. I got some people, when the stream goes live, it gets posted to socials. So like people start to leave comments. And I'm just like seeing the craziest notifications in my X. Anyways, shout out, good morning. Hello, party people. So recently I have to give a shout out to Milan, who created the Nomad project that a lot of people are familiar with. Tap and go payments on the Hedera network, second place winner overall, in the Hedera Hello Future Hackathon. And recently he was on a panel for the Linux Foundation alongside some other folks, including Wes Geisenberger from HBAR Foundation. And the panel was hosted by Lehman. So this is on the Linux Foundation's YouTube channel. I would say check it out. And especially for Milan's comments as well. I think it's really great. So huge shout out to Milan. Also like HBAR Foundry, all that kind of good stuff. There's a theme, right? Community organizations, grassroots organizations, open source stuff. Last week I also had a great conversation with Richard Baer. Great conversation, more like an hour and a half odyssey into the nitty gritty with Hyro. A lot of people were very, very excited about the news last week on Monday about Hedera. We know that Hedera Hashgraph is open source already, but taking that open source code, moving it into the Linux Foundation, which is a first for an L1 DLT. And then that source code lives as a new project, Hyro, under the decentralized trust within the Linux Foundation. So lots of great things, easier for developers, easier for enterprises to develop, all that kind of stuff. And then the Hedera public network will be using the Hyro code base. So it all kind of connects. It's all part of this vision that, Richard Bear was kind of highlighting, has been years and years in the making. So a long way to get here. And really what we're focused on now as we look forward into Hyro is moving that actual source code. So that's the big challenge ahead. So I'd encourage anybody that's watching Hyro, that's what you're watching right now, is how does that code move to the decentralized trust under the Linux Foundation, and how does that technical steering committee evolve? That's the really important thing. Also, exciting news to see NFT ecosystem on Hedera kind of coming alive a little bit. We got Dead Pixels drop 5 incoming October 21st, 800 HBAR. And a reminder, all the Ghost Pass, all the Ghost holders, and then all the Ghost Pass holders, they're all whitelists. So that's a really, really interesting thing. So I think this is going to be exciting. NFTs on Hedera, obviously Dead Pixels being one of the lead projects there. So I'm definitely gonna be keeping an eye on that. I posted to Twitter, but I don't know if anyone saw, but I grabbed a new Ghost recently. So go check out my profile if you want to see what Ghost I grabbed. More fun updates. I don't know who saw this, but probably everybody, but Charles Atkins, the president of Hedera, really showing his meme chops when it comes to the ecosystem, meme coins, all that kind of stuff. So people aren't familiar with the meta here. Grelf is a meme coin on Hedera and also a frequent caller of the show. And the giraffe is something the community has kind of rallied behind. It was an idea from Grelf, and an actual formal grant was sent to the HBAR Foundation. It's been circling around, but the whole idea is, can the community procure a giraffe? I think that's fantastic. Ideally, a giraffe named Bertha. Brady, good to see you. And it's good to see this. And I mean, people look at this, if you're really on the outside of Hedera, or if you're not so much in the meme crowd, the degen crowd, you might look at this and go like, Charles, like, what are you doing? You're the president of Hedera. This organization governed, this public DLT network governed by major corporations, et cetera, et cetera. What are you doing? Why are you posting this to your Twitter? But the thing is that this is what marketing's about, right? The people that invest in HBAR, the people that are driving revenue on the network, it's people in the DeFi ecosystem, and DeFi at the forefront of that is meme coins and these different types of things. So this is a pretty common thing for crypto founders and leaders to do, is really embrace that sense of community, like appreciate what is growing the network largely. So this is great to see. I know that some people won't dig this, but to be honest, like, don't worry about it. This is just fun stuff. God forbid we have some fun in this industry. So this is great to see. And it honestly, just speaking from the other side, this shows Charles gets it, like he's speaking to the community. It's clear that there's a lot of support behind this, a lot of people going off in the comments. And I did reach out to Gerbert himself, and this is something that is pretty organic. He saw this. I mean, Gerbert did send out this message through his machine. I honestly don't know how he has it hooked up in his stump, but out in the bog and the swamp. But he did send it. Obviously, took a long time to get to Charles, I imagine, with the technology that Gerbert has access to, but he got it, and Gerbert was surprised. This is not some kind of coordinated thing between Grelf and Charles. This is literally just Charles posting a facsimile received by by Grelf. So that's great. Yeah, Laser Eyes Giraffe. Yeah, honestly, that was my comment. That was my comment to Rob Allen commenting Giraffe Squad. So Giraffe Squad, rise up. Let's go. Let's see what else we got going on here. Also, too, we've got a very interesting tidbit of info related to Charles as well. This was a clip from an interview that Charles gave at an event hosted by Orbis86. Shout out to Sonia who ran this panel, talking to Charles, and she does great events. I went to one of her events in Toronto recently, and it was fantastic. But this with Charles was very, very interesting because, as Coinman points out, there's a clip from this interview, and Charles says something very, very interesting. And I just wanted to take a look at this really quick because I think that this is going to, pique the interest of quite a few people in the ecosystem. So let's take a look into this clip from Orbis86.
I think one of the interesting things is we're having conversations, and we've actually had other L1s reach out to us and say that they've built specific products on their chain, and then later come to find out it doesn't scale well, or that it doesn't have the security features that they had hoped to have, or speed and scalability that they need, to the point where there's some chains out there asking if they can actually lodge and build their products on Hedera now, which we're finding really interesting.
And right there, the clip is a little quiet, but what Charles is saying is there are L1s that have built applications on their networks. And this is a public interview, that have built applications on their networks that are now reaching out to Hedera saying, hey, can we migrate some of these applications to Hedera for that security, performance, stability, all those kinds of things. So that's a very interesting thing. And again, Charles, president of Hedera, it really gets you thinking, like, who are those networks? What are those applications? And what do those relationships look like going forward? Is this a possibility where we see, the relationship between Hedera and other L1s deepen further, right? Even just beyond DREC Alliance and all these other different groups that Hedera is a part of. Very interesting development. So I wanted to highlight that clip. I think that should be on everybody's mind right now of kind of, what could that mean? Quick shout out to Earthlings as well. Earthlings recently sharing an update on their game and basically talking about how difficult it is to build a Web3 game, right? It's not the case that you can just, that you can just, slap on any game into a DLT like Hedera. You really have to put a ton of work into this, and it's not easy. Like they're showing here, like different particle effects they have, animals. But again, this is a project that's very interesting to me, and I think many in this ecosystem, because it comes from within Hedera, right? This isn't a gaming use case that's coming from somewhere else. They're really developing a lot of custom stuff, and most importantly, they have a strong community, a strong tokenized community. They've got a token out there, all these different types of things. So it's a very interesting, when we look at Web3 gaming, I think that narrative in particular is heating up. But when we look at Web3 gaming in Hedera specifically, Earthlings just jumps out as something that's fairly robust and pretty already kind of integrated and ingrained in the ecosystem. So shout out to Earthlings. I dig it. I see Brady is watching. He's leaving some comments. I know Brady will leave a comment about this, but this is a recent tweet from Brady. And I love this because a lot of people remember the in previous Karate Combat events, Hedera's marketing around it has been horrible, right? Sometimes they didn't even tweet during the event. This recent Karate Combat was great. They were active, they were tweeting, they were sharing clips, and I think that it not only did it contribute to the reach of Karate Combat for sure, but also it really got the community so much more involved, and it didn't leave you with any bad taste in your mouth after the event, at least from a Hedera community perspective. So it was great. Now, the downside is that there were some really great tweets that were posted by Hedera, as you can see in Brady's screen recording. Some really great tweets that have been deleted, and we don't know why, but we're figuring it out, or they're figuring it out. It looks like some of the tweets that were deleted contain the cash tag karate. So, you think about Hedera legal and those different types of things. unfortunately it makes sense. But what Brady said here, I think they're getting it. So I think this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Got to keep the foot on the gas, encourage what we want to see from Hedera. And I think that overall, there's still a lot more to do, a lot more change to see, a lot more needs to be done when it comes to marketing. But I do have to say, excuse me, God, Ottawa allergies. I do have to say, the most recent event versus previous events, night and day. The commercial was better, everything was good. So I think that like if we use that comparison, night and day difference. So shout out to everybody at Hashgraph and Hedera and all those, and HBAR Foundation, all those folks really leaning into the marketing and in some fresh ways. Very needed, and really, really good stuff to see. What else is going on? This was very interesting to some people. Again, I always say like some people, and I'm always thinking about the crypto space, but everybody in Hedera. This was, and shout out to HBAR Tata, frequent viewer of the show, sharing this post from Emerge VC. Tata shares, Dubai-based Emerge VC launches a $300 million fund to invest in AI and Web3, backed by institutional investors, family offices, and Web3 founders. They also just announced they've invested in Hedera HBAR because its Hashgraph technology offers unmatched speed, security, and efficiency. So as we can see, a little bit of out of left field, I didn't see a ton of heads up on this. Is this a situation where Hedera or the organizations are involved in some way with this? Is this just truly a random VC or investment group just checking out the ecosystem and buying some HBAR? Is the purchase done over the counter? We don't quite know what the deal is, but this is good to see. Not only have we seen outside investments in Hedera projects like Neuron, TuneFM, and MTech recently, but also now we're starting to see, okay, maybe some people are actually buying up HBAR as a investment in Hedera itself. So very cool to see, and we're going to be watching stuff like this pretty closely because it's very interesting. The one thing that we really need in this ecosystem is liquidity. We need outside money coming in. Hopefully, that is one of those things. Another very interesting thing, just quickly mentioning, MIOO, they have announced a new collaboration with Temporally London that's leveraging the Hedera network for tracking the life cycle of certain garments, right? Certain products. So when you look at the carbon offset footprint of different things, when you're tracking a product through its life cycle, with MIOO and Temporally London, this is what's going to allow the carbon footprint and I guess other aspects of a piece of clothing, a garment, through the life cycle, both when it's manufactured, initially sold, the secondary sale, like buying something off the rack secondhand. So this is a very interesting thing. And again, this is I get the sense this is a little higher profile, right? It's luxury items. They did a campaign on Times Square, these different types of things. So and they're working with the HBAR Foundation. So MIOO, another one to keep an eye on. Absolutely. This was a great comment, just to refresh folks on this. We talked about this on the show, but there's an update to it. So I shared this meme. I was like, don't send, I haven't associated yet. A familiar feeling that we have in the ecosystem. And Richard Baer responds, VP of Engineering at Hashgraph, sounds like you need HIP 904. And HIP 904, of course, is the frictionless airdrops we've been talking about for a very long time. The ability to airdrop NFTs, tokens, what have you, to many people's wallets and not have to, communicate with them beforehand. Hey, can you associate this token? Hey, can you do this? It'll create a situation where these folks will be able to just accept those airdrops in a native fashion on the network, which is huge. I'm hoping to have Patches on the show again soon to chat a little more about this. But one side note, and I don't want to read too much into it, but when you make a Hedera improvement proposal, a HIP, what happens is you will list the different projects that are requesting it. Who wants this functionality, right? And we see some familiar projects. We see that, DEXs and wallets want this more broadly in the ecosystem, external Web3 users, and more notably some of these projects. We also see Rarible listed. Now, folks familiar with Rarible know how big that brand is in crypto. And so Rarible is requesting this functionality on the network. So worth noting, very interesting and exciting, and worth noting. This is the first breadcrumb that I've seen regarding Rarible publicly. So make of it what you will. What this means is Rarible wants this functionality on the network. That's all I can tell. Theo, thank you for tuning in. I am doing great today. Lots of good news to chat about. Moving on to a couple of our last news stories before we dive into Hashpoint with Brian from Hashpoint. UDPN, this one kind of came out of nowhere for me, but this is very, very cool. I haven't had a ton of time to take a deep dive in on it. Someone asks real quick, Milton, what is the ETA for HIP 904 going live on mainnet? I don't know. I know it's on testnet. I'm not 100% sure. The best way to know is if you go on the documentation and looking at the upcoming versions. I would check that out 100%. Don't even know if it's currently live yet. Might be, but I think it's on testnet. I think it's coming to mainnet soon. I'll have to double check though. UDPN. So this use case is one I think that's right up the alley for what a lot of people are looking for when it comes to Hedera. There's a lot of conversation around CBDC. There's a lot of conversation around stablecoins. So this kind of stuff is very exciting. Now, this UDPN is still in a proof of concept, but this news is very exciting out of Singapore. Just at the top here, today, global IT engineering and solutions provider GFT, not GPT, GFT, and decentralized cloud infrastructure company Red Date Technology have successfully integrated Hedera network-based stablecoins and the MTech CBDC sandbox on the Universal Digital Payments Network, UDPN. This new integration will ease the development of programmable payment applications leveraging stablecoins and CBDCs issued on Hedera. So this is a very interesting thing. Other parts of the news here, when it comes to what exactly this is, again, in this proof of concept, GFT developed and integrated 2 custom transaction nodes connecting UDPN to the digital currency systems through a single transaction gateway for transfers, transactions, and query results. So check this out. One of these was supporting stablecoins launched with the Hedera Stablecoin Studio, right? Now we're starting to think of AUDD. Now we're starting to think of some different things. And one supporting CBDCs from the MTech CBDC sandbox. So this proof of concept is also being worked on with the HBAR Foundation and Hashgraph, testing these things and supporting these things. And they successfully processed Hedera transactions. The transaction nodes were deployed in dedicated test instances, including creating a decentralized identity, mapping the decentralized identity to a Hedera account, and initiating transfers and cross-chain swaps. And Sabrina, who leads finance and payments at the HBAR Foundation, really great individual. As payments increasingly migrate on-chain through the adoption of stablecoins and CBDCs, the need for Hedera native asset to support emerging cross-chain payment rails has become clear. We need to work with UDPN, a trailblazer in the field, and see this proof of concept as a first step towards connecting Hedera with the greater digital currency ecosystem. So what does this all mean? Well, when we look at what the Universal Digital Payments Network is all about, really what it's about is everything that we've kind of been floating around for a while. Stablecoins, CBDCs, one or the other, what one's first, this and that. Clearly, you kind of have to have both interacting with each other. When you think of the pie in the sky situation where a country has a CBDC, naturally, the country's currency would be a tokenized currency, would be a stable coin. So to me, largely, of course, what probably stable coins are going to really be taking the forefront for the next years to come before we actually see CBDCs. But again, they're designed to, I think, really work together closely, especially when you talk about, these central banks and how a government's currency is handled. So I guess my takeaway from this is we've got, Joshua, the Hash Shanty legend tuning in. You took the words right out of my mouth. Interoperability, that's exactly it. Nail on the head. This is about interoperability. You have to have both of these pieces. You have to have this infrastructure rolling out. And, it feels like this type of thing. And this is, I feel, the first. This feels like what Hedera has been building towards for quite a while. So I think that is definitely a huge one. Absolutely. And then we've got a couple other things to talk about later on in the show, but I want to switch now to what I think is probably one of the most exciting things recently in the ecosystem, which is this hunger for data and analytics, where there has been, I feel like, a big lack of transparency in those ways. Now, I mean, a lot of people are familiar with tracking TPS. A lot of people are familiar with now with being able to see revenue with hederarevenue.com. And, there's some other things we can look at, stablecoin liquidity and this and that, but Hedera is so specific. There's so many gaps. And recently a new platform launched, Hashpoint Research. And I just pulled it up earlier on the show. And this is really a breath of fresh air, I think, for a lot of people, because it takes so many of these different components, brings them together, and provides context for what we're looking at. And most importantly, does it in a way that's designed for the HBAR investor. That's not just for the developer, but really for the HBAR investor. So without further ado, just a quick intro. Brian Coleman has a deep background in traditional finance, having worked as a portfolio manager and investment officer. And like many of us, he traveled down the Hedera rabbit hole, becoming an HBARbarian. And over the years, he's been on this crazy ride with the rest of us. And most recently, of course, as I mentioned, launched Hashpoint, which transforms raw ledger data into valuable context, refined investment insights for HBAR holders. So, Brian, it's so great to have you on the show. It's really been awesome to see Hashpoint launch and kind of take the ecosystem by storm. And since the launch on Monday, how's the experience been on your end? Is this the first project you've kind of brought to the Hedera ecosystem?
Yeah, actually, it is the first. It's not the first idea, but yeah, it's the first one that got legs and got launched. And it just came out of my own need, desire to kind of see the data in a way that made sense and provided information. And ultimately, the point was, you get sold on the technology and what Hashgraph, the consensus algorithm, means to DLT and DLT adoptions, and how it enables enterprise adoption. And, once you get comfortable with that, you start to recognize it as DLTs might be new, but we've seen this before. You've seen it with processors, you've seen it with bandwidth, you've seen it with storage. There's kind of that seminal event that makes, that kind of kicks off these disruptive technologies, and they go from, playgrounds and, interesting, maybe kind of, but missing the mark of the, of where the established companies need these technologies to be. Then they have that moment, and I think Hashgraph is that moment for DLTs. And so then the question becomes, all right, if I buy into the trend here, and I buy into the adoption story, and I think this looks like, microprocessors back in 1971,
Right.
and how is this market going to develop, and how do you value HBAR? That was really the starting point. And so it's thinking about the asset and its multiple purposes, which is unique in itself. The pricing model in Hedera is unique within DLTs. So there isn't a lot of there's not a lot of textbook valuation theory to rely on. It's a financial asset, so you can look at its future cash flows as the source of its value, but it kind of required a unique, to really sit down and think about what HBAR is and what's going to drive it, and the realities of a proof of stake network, and that became that's the origin story for Hashpoint. And then the rest of it is then understanding the data that you need to look at to really look at valuation scenarios. And so those data models then got built up around, or for the purpose of feeding the valuation model. And everybody likes to, I'm guilty too, everybody likes to look at the spinning dial, the TPS rolling, and the gauges, and but it's really, it's really the data is to provide the context for, all right, we've all, assumingly everybody's kind of bought into the long story here for Hedera, and now it's how do we value it, and how do we measure it going forward, and how do we know if we're on track or not, and and how do you have a voice? If you don't have the data and you don't have context, how do you make an argument that something should be done or something isn't being done, or the wrong thing is being done?
Gotcha. It's so funny. Like as soon as we start talking, my brain starts going. I had a couple notes, but now I feel like they're totally irrelevant, because you just got me going with those comparisons with some other industries, specifically the tech industry. And you're right. It's almost like when I look at the GPU industry and how AI has impacted that, there's an element of you start out going one direction that turns out success lies in a completely other direction you couldn't see. And when we look at NVIDIA as a company, they could barely get computer graphics figured out back in the day. They had a bit of a breakthrough, and then came blockchain and Bitcoin mining, and then came AI. And now you have this incredibly successful company. And then it also makes me think of things like, you're definitely familiar with the Lehman Harvard talk, probably someone myself watch it regularly, but in that talk again, Lehman compares this industry and the different DLT technologies inside the industry as these companies during the dot-com bubble. And you have this rise of a bazillion different companies, and then a collapse, and a few survive. So maybe, I just wanted to kind of expand on some of that thinking a little bit, because I think that's a topic that the community's coming back to a little bit. Now that Hedera has gone so forward and evolved and matured as an ecosystem, we're starting to think about that again. Like, how does this play out in this kind of blockchain industry? And how does that kind of thesis of Lehman's kind of hold? What are your thoughts on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny. It's as an investor in technology, you think there's a technical skill required, and there's a financial skill required, but really it's a lot of just imagination. It's in 1971, when the Intel 4004 processor, I guess the first single chip processor, was introduced. It had 2,300 transistors on it, and it was, I think it cost $60, which would be a lot more in today's money, but a couple cents per transistor. And the latest Apple processor has 130 billion
something crazy.
So when you go from 2,300 transistors to you can't forecast what's going to happen, but as the price per unit continues to drop, it just opens up new markets. And it's a trend, and you just have to, you kind of, as an investor, you have to believe that trend is unfolding. And I think that's what Hashgraph is that kind of seminal moment in DLTs where you take the price of a transaction from, dollars for some networks and variable, and you drop it down to consensus at 1/100th of a penny, and it's fixed. And that's got the same effect as dropping the price of transistors in semiconductors. It opens up new markets. Atma would not, Avery Dennison would not build Atma if it was, 40 cents a transaction today
And fluctuating.
And some of these other, some of the IoT and some of these other applications, you can't scan the QR code of a zucchini in the store because you want to see if it's truly organic, and then suddenly it was $1.50 to that transaction. Those applications just don't exist until you get something like Hashgraph, which provide scale, the fixed pricing. I've always been kind of I kind of look at a lot of the white paper claims and the Twitter claims that people make about DLT capacity and what these guys can do in testnet and all the other kind of things. You just look at the pricing model. If you can't offer fixed USD pricing, then you obviously have some capacity limitations somewhere, and that's why you have variable pricing.
Right.
So it's that fixed pricing model, I think, that is the low fixed cost
secret sauce.
Yeah, it's what makes Web3 is a disruptive technology, but it's getting those Web3 technologies into Web2 companies is where the disruption really happens. Web3 sitting in DeFi kind of casino playgrounds where you're thinking you're going to disintermediate all those Web2 companies, that's not really where the disruptive innovation happens. It's the developing the tools that get Web3 technologies into Web2, and I think that's what Hedera's done. You look at the stablecoin studio, the real world asset studio, the NFT studio. You look at a lot of the different open source tools that are now being developed. It's Hashgraph as the enabler, and now it's developing all these tools that kind of bridge to the Web2 companies. So
absolutely. I saw someone post on X the other day that kind of got me thinking. They posted the phrase Moore's Law squared. And I think it was someone, it might have been the CEO of Anthropic or some kind of AI company, but you do get that sense that, like, as you've mentioned, we have a hockey stick moment of innovation, but now it's like the hockey stick is like going straight up at a certain point. And it does feel like that in this industry. And then where my mind goes now is kind of like the present moment. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on this as well. When we look at Hedera, Hashgraph, the technology, the network, whatever it might be, how do we reconcile kind of like what has been determined like short-term success for these networks that has come from, like you mentioned, like the casinos, the degen stuff, NFTs, those kinds of things, I think have generated billions of dollars for some of these other networks. So how do we kind of navigate that, as well as the long-term viability of this technology, which is where I think Hashgraph really is differentiated from the rest? It feels like to me we're in a situation where in the short term, for kind of the survival to the top 5, Hedera is kind of having to play a bit of a different game. And it's of course got the ace up its sleeve for the long term, but it does feel like Hedera's kind of in a weird way out of its element a little bit, but as we're seeing, it's starting to gain some real traction. But I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on if you're kind of feeling that too, or.
Yeah, it's, the one thing about these, tokens and this decentralized platform is, you don't have the issuer, like you have in equities or fixed income, you've got companies that speak to investors. They take responsibility for informing investors. They provide estimates and analyst days and investor relations departments, and they kind of communicate a strategy. Whereas that isn't happening. I don't know whether it could or how it should be done better. But I think that's, you're told that this is an enterprise grade network and they're going for enterprise customers, and it looks like we missed a lot of opportunities because other tokens go up and they have the TVL and the liquidity, and they do there's success on those metrics, and you don't get an explanation as to why we shouldn't worry about that, or what metrics we should be looking at instead of that. We get updates, kind of news, technology becomes available, and it's kind of up to the community to fill in the blank. So I don't really know how, I don't think that, governing council's ever going to have an investor relations department, but, you don't want to be a security, but there's got to be a way to communicate to HBAR holders. I mean, you coined the phrase, right? The retail base of bills.
I'm not wearing the hat today. I should have worn the hat. Damn, but yeah.
You look. I mean, there's the Hashpoint. There's the HBAR distribution models you can look at, and it quantitatively proves that there's retail pays the bills. I mean, the average account size is low thousands of dollars, and but I don't know I don't know what the right model is for a decentralized entity, communicating to, or a decentralized network. The governing council could take some responsibility for better communication to holders, and why the retail DeFi piece and the successes of the other networks aren't happening on Hedera, and maybe communicate why we shouldn't be looking for those, and what we should be looking for.
Right.
But the other thing too is, I mean, look, we just did 70 billion transactions.
Yeah.
It's kind of, there are metrics that would suggest that there's some successes being had. But it's not reflected in the token price, and ultimately that's what everybody's in it for. This isn't an altruistic endeavor. People don't volunteer their capital with no expectation of a return. So when you're not getting the return, it does. You do say, well, maybe enterprise isn't the DLT strategy. Maybe I should just go join the herd, and
Yeah, I feel you 100%, and I think that when I listen to things like, for example, on Spaces earlier this year, and I keep bringing this up on the show because I think it's just so on point. Charles, the president of Hedera, was asked the question by a community member, are we going to see retail adoption before we see enterprise adoption, or vice versa? And his argument, again, as the president of Hedera, was, you have to have retail adoption for enterprise adoption, right? The issue is that enterprises, I feel my sense is, for a long time, enterprises come to Hedera, or Hedera goes to enterprises and goes to that market and says, we want to be the network for you. We want you to use us. Enterprise says, well, you guys need more retail activity. And Hedera goes, but no, we want you. and I think that there's this change now happening where, as Charles outlined, it's not about, do we go retail or enterprise? I don't think that's what this is about. It's, retail is a stepping stone to enterprise, stablecoin liquidity, and then retail focused applications like DeFi and borrowing and lending and the casinos and NFTs and this and that. If you can get that stuff on your network, and gain that mind share. That's, I think, because at the end of the day, how enterprises choose networks are, they just do what the guys in the CTO's office says to do, or they go on the network that everybody on the board is invested in or whatever. And largely that's just following the herd to Ethereum, to Solana, to wherever. And these are the kinds of moves that, before you hopped on, I was sharing that post of, again, Charles the President, with that Grelf meme of a fax he received. And it's those kinds of things that I think we start to see that change of Hedera of, okay, we'll focus on retail. We'll play that game for the short term because it's clear that what they've been doing maybe has fallen short, and the addition of this stuff will kind of help things move along. And also, to your point on kind of investor relations stuff, this is a decentralized space. And what you're getting at, I think, is investor relations is going to look really different in this decentralized world versus a world where you're dealing with companies that have a very traditional way of doing this. And Hashpoint kind of seems to be a little seed of that idea of like, this is what investor relations could look like in a decentralized world.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, it was built for HBAR investors. I mean, it was, the data is curated so that it matters, but you don't want to clutter the site with every piece of data that you could. I mean, it's endless. But yeah, coming from traditional the traditional capital markets where financials are packaged for you. You got your Ks and your Qs and your earnings calls, and then you come over to the DLT space, and there's more data than I mean, it'd be like if somebody dumped every Apple receipt on your desk every quarter, but you'd have every Apple transaction, but it'd be unusable.
Right.
So that's the with Hgraph's mirror nodes and the Hashpoint front end, it's a tool and a platform for packaging that data and turning that data into useful information. And it's for an investor. So I mean, if it's it can't ever be an investor relations because it'll never speak for Hedera. But but in terms of providing that platform that where an investor can go and look at meaningful numbers and look at meaningful trends and the right data series, and then understand how it plays into valuation, then certainly that's the point. And this first iteration, the launch of it is the data that matters right now. But as the network changes, as the transaction mix changes, as the use cases start to diversify, then the Hashpoint will keep up with that, and our platform's going to reflect that.
Right on. Okay, so I wanted to dive into Hashpoint a little bit, and I think that one of the reasons I called the title of this show, Information is Power Part 2, is because I did an episode where I had the HBAR Bull as a guest on, and I called that episode Information is Power. And it was, he had just been let go from the HBAR Foundation. And we were talking about a few different things. And it feels like Hashpoint is like an answer to some of those conversations. And a lot of those conversations are just focused around a lack of transparency for HBAR investors. Now we're starting to see some more of that, and Hashpoint is a big piece of that. And I know that maybe you're not like the main technical mind behind the actual application, but I was just curious if we could just take a minute and kind of talk about, like, we talk about all of these mountains of data. How does this thing work? Like, how does all of this, these 70 billion transactions get funneled into the Hashpoint platform that create all these wonderful insights around this?
There's an output I want to see, and I'll just toggle over to the
go for it. I was joking with Brian before the show. I was like, I don't even know if we're going to get to look at the platform because could see us just rambling on about Hedera for forever. But I'll throw your screen up here. Let's dive in.
And it's funny. I mean, HBAR Bull, I was just had a bit of a discussion with him on on this here. I wanted to see, for example, I wanted to see how the HBAR staked for rewards was responding to the APY. And, I made the comment that, when this change was made from 6.5% to a max 2.5%, the amount of HBAR stake for reward continued to go up and then eventually plateaued. And he said, nah, I don't think so. It kind of looks to me like once that announcement was made, that's when the HBAR stake for reward began to plateau, and had the APY not been cut, or maybe not been cut so severely, then this number would have still gone up. It's like we're just two guys with two different interpretations of the data, and that's what it's for. But that's that's how this comes about. It's there's data, or a data set that I think is important to look at, that's got relevance on the dynamics of the network and valuation going forward. And I tell my brother what I want to see, and he
gotcha.
He writes the he writes the code, and here it is.
Right on. That's so awesome. Yeah, because a lot of this stuff, because it's so new, and I think because people in the Hedera ecosystem are technical people, they're analytical people. I think that when we look at these types of tools, a lot of times people are like, how does this work? Like, what's going on here? And like from our end at Hgraph, it's really like we've got these dozens of terabytes of data on our infrastructure and our servers and hard drives, and through our APIs, we can deliver that data to Hashpoint. And this is like the magic of what this is all about, is with these mirror nodes, with this data layer of Hedera, this, as I kind of call it, the other half of the network. That's the other half is consensus nodes, putting transactions in. This is about getting transactions out. The beautiful thing about this is, as you pointed out, this is just a clump of data that doesn't make any sense. But if we, at Hgraph, as a mirror node provider, can make this data available quickly in large chunks, it just unlocks so many possibilities. And as soon as I learned about Hashpoint, when you guys reached out to us, I was like, this, like, as a community member, this is what I've been waiting for. These are the answers to, well, no, maybe not the answers. It's the foundation for conversation. To kind of to your point, we can disagree on things. We can have debates about staking economics and different stuff. But I think what this is really about is, let's have those conversations on solid ground now and be able to kind of move forward knowing where we are,
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think the staking APY is one of the best case in points at the moment. I mean, it's topical. I mean, it's a low number, and it's way below. I mean, you've got a low staking APY, and you've got a token that's underperforming. I mean, I think we're 42 ranked now, and versus it had been what, 31, 32 for
we got in the 20s at one point, I think.
Yeah. So and then the staking APY is low. So that it creates issues, and they're valid questions. I mean, should the staking APY be higher? I mean, I personally typically fall more into the real yield camp, where the staking reward should be paid out of network transactions. But there's legitimate arguments to make that topping off that account and paying some higher nominal yield until the transactions pick up is justified. I mean, there's a way to split the difference. But when you look at the we were about 500,000 HBAR negative daily at the 6.5% APY, and now we're, as that chart showed, I could pull it back up if
go ahead.
But as that chart showed, the
this is really interesting, by the way, everyone watching. This is one of the things I think that really surprised me the most when you kind of highlighted this in the data on Hashpoint. Yeah. This is really what surprised me.
I mean, I think this is a kind of a, you kind of look at, the green bars here, and, this account 800 is now positive. These aren't big numbers by any stretch, but now the APY is it's bottomed, and you could kind of have a forecasting panel here, which is at the current APY, this is kind of the trend. It's not really, I mean, in a year or so at this rate, it'd be close to 1% again. But in any event, I think this is kind of an important and refreshing bit of data. I mean, is there, I mean, look, Hedera could have run at these kind of negative numbers for years with the, right. If they wanted to take unallocated HBAR and top up 800 with it. But again, I kind of fall more in the, the real yield camp, and I'm not invested in Hedera for, 0.2% yield, or even a 6.5% yield. I mean, it's if this is microprocessors in 1971, then we're in it for quite a bit more growth and quite a bit more appreciation than what the current staking rewards are on any specific day.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that, and it brings up something in my mind that is interesting, which is we touched on this, which is like, okay, staking's low, and there's talks about real staking versus, we could call it subsidized staking maybe, and that it kind of, to me, feels the same as almost like the MIOO discussion, right? And the MIOO discussion is like, okay, so we've got this use case. The HBAR Foundation is giving ATMA HBAR to pay for their use case, but also Rob Allen on the Governing Council is telling us that, ATMA has really invested substantially in their infrastructure for the use case. So the question is, is ATMA going to keep using Hedera after the use case is no longer subsidized? And all these kind of questions come to mind. To me, it feels kind of the same way with staking, right? Which is, okay, so on one side, we've got a camp that's like, let's just do real staking, right? Let's have the network dictate the staking based off of in and out, right? That equilibrium that you've brought up that we'll touch on shortly, but the real staking. But then you look at the benefits of the subsidized element of MIOO, and it's like, to your point, wow, 70 billion transactions. Like what a efficient marketing spend, you could say, because it's going right back into the network, right? It's not like we're giving ATMA a bunch of money and they're selling HBAR to pay employees. That HBAR is cycling right back into treasury and right back into staking, people staking to the network. So that's an interesting dynamic. You take that thinking and bring it back to staking, and you go, well, what if, Hedera or some other organization were to dump, a couple 100 million HBAR into account 800 or whatever? It's like, well, that just kind of cycles back into the ecosystem. It's not like Governing Council members are staking, and well, they are staking, but they don't get rewards. But, it's definitely great marketing for the network. I mean, HBAR with a 6.5% yield is very attractive versus a 0.2% yield. So do you kind of see it that way? Like as an example of like a bit of analogous to MIOO and then subsidized staking?
Yeah. I sometimes read the, comments in Reddit or other social media forums, and it's there's the criticism that ATMA doesn't pay for its transactions, but people want higher staking rewards. The subsidized ATMA transactions as you point out, feed into the staking. So you subsidize Atma, you subsidize the staking rewards.
Right.
So if you don't want to subsidize Atma, then you kind of sacrifice. You take those HBAR from Atma and put them directly into the staking account. That doesn't make sense. But on the Atma, I'm not that concerned about. My sense is, and I don't know this for certain, but Atma is a platform that existed before they connected Hedera to it. They have 30 billion connected products. Hedera is a feature of Atma. And what I think might be going on is that Atma itself is a platform, and then you have to develop applications on top of Atma. And it very well could be that Atma has its own customers that are developing their own, applications on top of the network that use Hedera, and these HBARs that go to Atma then are given to their own customers that are developing their own. So it's to support Atma's customers as they develop their applications that use the DLT. I mean, I have zero concern that Atma is going to, disconnect Hedera and say, nobody wants or needs, the DLT features. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, when you look at kind of the regulatory path that the world seems to be on with carbon tracking and trading and digital product passports and the carbon, the emission scope 1, 2, and 3. The need for things like Hedera are only growing. I mean, those things are not optional. Those aren't features that maybe we include, maybe we don't. I mean, if they're required from a regulatory standpoint, then it becomes, how do we implement it? How do we implement it cost effectively? And I think that's why Hedera is plugged into Atma. And then you got the Guardian, which is plugged into Hedera. And but I think the mistaken thinking is that as soon as Atma turned on the Hedera functionality, there were applications already running on Atma that needed Hedera. I think those applications then needed to be built by Atma's customers. And so, so I think it's that kind of, that's where the subsidized HBAR comes from. It's not to encourage Atma not to disconnect Hedera or to keep giving them free HBAR or else they won't use it or any of those kind of scenarios. I think it's very much just kind of a pump priming.
Gotcha. Yeah, people talk about the carts and horses and chickens and eggs, and this is really what it's about. It's, Avery Dennison, governing council member at MIOO under Avery Dennison, and it's not like they're just going to be able to give this new offering to their customers and say, hey, here's this new thing, and go through that whole cycle. To your point, this is, you could view it as kind of like a free trial for their customers or a subsidized trial, or just them being able to say, hey, hook this in, get the benefits of this, get hooked to this new service from MIOO. And it's very interesting that you bring up kind of the regulatory components and the SOC 1, 2, and 3 is because the other interesting side to this is it's not just kind of saying, hey, this might be popular in the future. You're legally going to be required to record these types of data in this fashion. And so that's the other interesting element to this is truly it's a matter of when, not if. And the missing ingredient is, can Hedera get out in the forefront seemingly at any cost and making good enough progress? So I share your sentiment that I'm not too worried about at MIOO. I don't know what the chances are of another deal like that happening, but I think it was necessary for many different reasons. And just from a marketing standpoint, I'm not going to turn my nose up at 70 billion transactions.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, I think there's, the implementation of Hedera in business processes is, and the efficiencies, everything, it just makes good business sense. It's not simply a regulatory kind of driven obligation. There's one piece of the Atma ecosystem that I think is, really tremendous, which is Williot, which is a IoT application. They make battery-free Bluetooth transmitters that roll off.
How does that work?
They're like, it's ambient energy.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is one of the coolest. I thought it was, when I first read it, I had to make sure I wasn't reading April 1 kind of.
Same as Hashgraph, like this can't be this good.
It's an amazing, and I saw a interview with that Max Winograd did with somebody from Williot, and it sounds like the idea for Atma came from Williot.
Gotcha.
From what Williot was doing. So it's just there's a really interesting relationship there. Avery Dennison manufactures the Williot Bluetooth tags. These things are like postage stamps. But you can connect them to virtually anything, and you're not looking at Internet of Things where you need radio gateways and all the other high equipment, expensive equipment. They can measure temperature and humidity and on vegetable crates, and but the amount of information and efficiency that kind of technology brings into food supply chains, the amount of waste it eliminates. Again, it's not just a regulatory requirement, but it just makes good economic sense. And those guys, they call themselves the Internet of Trillions. And that's a piece of, so that's another piece of Atma. That's another connected piece to Atma. So I don't really worry about, Hedera's, stickiness within Atma. I mean, I just think Atma is in its infancy, and it's gonna grow, and as it does, so will the Hedera transactions.
I love that. Yeah, I really appreciate you kind of taking this deep dive on Atma kind of unexpectedly, because it is one of those things that I feel this community and this ecosystem, it is such a big piece of our ecosystem, but we've kind of gone like, all right, whatever, let's move on kind of thing. But it is worth kind of still lingering on it a little bit, because there is more to unpack. It's not like MIOO switched it on and has done nothing. Their parent company and them have continued to innovate in different ways. So I appreciate that. I want to steer the conversation into a new area, but I think I appreciate kind of diving in on MIOO.
But that's another one of those areas where, there's that whole investor relations, the absence of somebody that can, educate the community on, I'm kind of perplexed as to why nobody has been able to say, this is why we subsidize Atma currently. It's just kind of perplexing that nobody's figured out how to it's a basic piece of information, and it's topical, and people, it pops up all the time. I don't know why there isn't somebody, just being responsive, just tweet out an answer. This is
this is the thing that I agree is so frustrating. We're seeing some comments already agreeing with, Brady, 1,000% agreed, is that I think that's the frustrating thing. It's the pushback that I've seen to that point of, like, to your example, why doesn't Avery Dennison or MIOO or whatever kind of speak to Hedera a little more? Or why doesn't Hedera speak about some of the different context and reasoning for some of these choices, why they do or don't do things. And it's like some of the pushback on the former is like, well, Avery Dennison doesn't want to say because it's their secret sauce. And if people find out they're using Hedera, then their competitors can start using it. And it's like, I don't get that component. It's not like if a competitor of MIOO finds out about Hedera, they're going to like one up MIOO or something. So it's like,
I thought the governing council was supposed to be encouraging these cases.
Yeah,
not hiding their involvement.
That's exactly it. It felt so weird. I put out a tweet the other day where I was like, should governing council members be ambassadors of the Hedera network? And it was so weird that I had to type that out because it is still a lingering question that remains unanswered. And if any echo comes back on that from leadership, it's always something that just feels like side skirting, like, oh, they, you don't talk about your technology stack. Nobody cares about that. People are going to use this and not realize they're using it, this and that. But kind of to our earlier conversation, it's like long-term, sure. The world will use Hedera. That sounds great. But what about right now? Trying to get off the ground, trying to get critical mass, network effects. Like why doesn't Avery Dennison, why doesn't Hedera like do these kinds of things more, these investor relations more? Because I agree with you. It would solve so many problems. Like, here's why this use case is handled in the way that it's handled. Here are the upsides and downsides. Why can't Hedera do something like that when a lot of traditional companies do things like that?
Yeah, or just say, you know what, we can't speak to Atma or Avery Dennison. But in theory, the reason we would subsidize a use case is here's a couple of reasons why it makes sense for us to do that. There's ways to address those kinds of concerns. And ultimately, when you talk about it, putting retail first, that's the kind of, I don't know that, more DeFi and DeFi protocols will matter, too much. But, if you give people the information and, you told them this, they're invested in a 100-year company, you kind of have to give you can't just wait 100 years and say, see, exactly. There's got to be a way to give the updates and answer the questions and, make sure things are on track. And when something comes up repeatedly, like the question about Atma's HBARs being subsidized, there needs to be a mechanism of just communicating to the community, why that's done and in what situations and circumstances it's done.
100%.
It doesn't seem that difficult.
And it's so intertwined. Like when we talk about, again, short-term versus long-term, retail-focused use cases versus enterprise, it's like they're all intertwined at a certain point. Like a great example is like borrowing and lending. It's like that can sometimes be viewed as, degen or DeFi or whatever. But again, when we look at how do enterprises choose the networks they're going to be that they're going to be building on right now, it's TVL. It's those kinds of metrics that I agree can sometimes be overplayed and not super accurate of a network's health. But what we've seen with what the stats show is across crypto, I think it's near or over half of TVL comes from borrowing and lending, which Hedera is lacking at a certain point. And so we look at platforms like Bonzo Finance that want to get launched on Hedera that need that support to do that. And I think that they've been, largely under supported in those different ways. It's those kind of retail use cases that I think create these environments where we have, enterprises are going to need better stablecoin liquidity. They're going to need more people holding HBAR. They're going to need these different types of things. They're going to need the price of HBAR to go up to secure the network. There's a direct correlation between how secure Hedera is and the price of HBAR. So I think how I view it is definitely not so much as, retail focused use cases versus enterprise. It's like they really need each other. And I think in the short, medium term, I think that enterprise use cases need the retail focused use cases. And I think that there just needs to be a larger focus placed on those kinds of things, even if it feels like a bit of a temporary detour from the original vision of Hedera. I think that's the sense that we're getting, is like, you know, there's different paths to 100 years, you know?
Yeah. I mean, throw everyone a bone, and you don't have to. You can deviate. You can deviate off of the enterprise. The enterprise only track. Yeah, certainly.
We can have some fun.
Yeah. God forbid.
We can, on this network, we can gamble and lose money faster than any other network, 3 to 5 seconds finality, and carbon negatively. So the future is now. There's just kind of bringing it back to Hashpoint, and I mean, geez, we've already been talking for 45 minutes. This is fantastic. I wanted to just open up another topic, which is revenue, and this is something that, again, like at Hashgraph or at Hgraph, we kind of introduced it with HederaRevenue.com in a rudimentary kind of user-friendly way. But Hashpoint is fantastic because your front end just really granulizes so many different things, provides that historical look at revenue. And what people are able to really drill down on is that valuation model as well. And what ties, I think, all of this together is, for sure, Hedera has fixed fees, but that doesn't mean that every service on Hedera costs the same to transact. Yeah. And again, another shocking statistic that you've shared is when you look at the revenue mix on Hedera, right? And for folks unfamiliar kind of with this concept, I think some of the stuff is new to many people, is, at MIOO processes 99.9% of transactions on the network, but they pay a very small fee for those transactions. So they actually only represent 80% or 85% of revenue on the network. And something that you've brought up, and I'll pull up your screen for you too, is something that you brought up that I find shocking is what happens when we change that revenue mix? If you've pointed out, if we change it 1%, it can have an absolutely drastic impact on the revenue generated by Hedera, AKA the money coming back to stakers, back to holders, back to the treasury. It's fascinating.
Yeah, this is the, this is currently being pulled from the network. So the transaction mix is 99.9% consensus service. But even this 0.1% is 8% of total revenue. And if you just do the math here, the other services are 88 times that. It'll depend on the mix of the other services, but right now it's about 87 times. The revenue is about 87 times consensus. So if you were to take
real quick, I just want to like really emphasize that for people listening, because I really want to make sure people get this, is what the data shows generated by the Hedera network is that 0.1% of the transactions sent to the network is responsible for almost 9% of revenue generated by the network. It's pretty wild. And
to see the sensitivity, if you just take this down to 98.9, so just a 1%, 100 basis point shift. Now you see that 1.1% of the transactions, that's almost half. That's now 50% of the network's revenue.
It's like a 4x or 10x or something.
Yeah, it's just, there's just a ton of sensitivity in this. In this scenario, right, I've just got 5,000 TPS in there. And that produces 30.8 million of network fees. In the original scenario, it was 17. So it's about an 80% increase in revenue just by that 1% change in the transaction mix. So yeah,
it's mind blowing.
It is. It's important. So yeah, you look for those kind of use cases that are going to come on and start to ramp up some of those other services. I don't know. Nobody has any insight into the use cases in the pipeline and what the transaction mix might look like in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So I don't know how to model that with any degree of certainty, but you can certainly play with the sensitivity here.
That's so crazy. And just kind of staying on the screen for a minute, this is your valuation model. This is kind of what we touched on previously, was this equilibrium curve, and the red dot is kind of where we are. And how you've outlined it is basically, it's, put simply, it's money in, money out. And if you have more money coming in than you have going out, you can run into problems. If you have more money going out than it's coming in, you can run into problems. So you really want that red dot, based off of the different parameters you adjust, to be riding nice and snug along that equilibrium curve, to have that longevity success of the network. And this is your valuation model. This I find is like the real kind of gem of Hashpoint.
Yeah, it's a proof of stake network, and this model is based on the binding constraint on all proof of stake networks, that the value that comes into the network, over the long term, you need to be in equilibrium, will be the value that comes out. So, it's kind of a nonprofit where, the revenues generated become the rewards paid out. And that's what this model shows. And it's interesting because, we price, the network is priced in dollars paid in HBAR. So the amount of HBAR flowing into the network is variable at any TPS, while you've got kind of a algorithmically defined staking reward APY on any level of HBAR stake. So it's kind of a fixed HBAR out with a variable HBAR in. And so what you get is this equilibrium curve, which is the relationship between the price of HBAR and a staking reward APY that would put the network in equilibrium depending on the scenario you want to look at. So just to have fun.
Let's have some fun. I dig it. How many TPS are we going for, Brian?
I maxed it at 500. Just whatever. Let's go
500,000.
Well, let's do something. Let's go 50.
Okay. I'd be happy with 50,000 TPS. Let's do it.
So at 50,000 TPS, and we keep the transaction mix right where it is. The network, and this is math. This is not, nobody can look at this and say, that's impossible.
Right.
The network fees would be 171 million. This I put in here because the first claim on revenue should be the operating expenses, that
right.
go to account 98.
How much does it cost to run the network?
Yeah, before you can even allocate to rewards. But this, I said, I'm going to leave this at 0, and I'll explain why in a second.
Okay.
So you've got 171 million now net available for rewards. The current allocation is 10% goes to the account 800. So that's why I set this to 0, because this kind of reflects the current parameters. Gotcha. 10% of revenue goes to account 800. So that's what this shows. But you can play with this, if you want to make an assumption that it gets 50-50 divided between 800 and 801 for staking rewards. But then on the way out, you've got the big variable is the amount of HBAR staked for rewards. Set for the network is currently 6.774 billion. These are, again, pulling real numbers from the network.
Right.
But if you set that at 7 billion, what you've got is at the current APY, the fair value equilibrium in this, the price of HBAR would have to rise to $1.19 for the amount of HBAR flowing into the network to equal the amount of HBAR flowing out of the network.
Gotcha.
And anywhere on this curve, you're in equilibrium.
Right.
So if the staking reward, went up to, 0.51, then the equilibrium price is 48 cents. So it's that trade-off between the price of HBAR, which influences a variable amount of HBAR flowing into the network against the staking APY, which is the determinant for the amount of HBAR flowing out. So it's a simple. I mean, if you sit with it for a little bit, I mean, it seems screwy for a little bit, but if you actually sit with it, it makes sense. And just do the math. I mean, start with the HBAR price times TPS is your US dollars flowing into the network, and then you've got HBAR stake times APY is your flowing out, and you'll see that you've got to ultimately in the long run be in equilibrium, and anywhere on this curve that condition is satisfied. But if the market is going to be at 0.2% staking APY, then the equilibrium price of HBAR is $1.22.
Right.
And there's a couple of points. There's a couple of points here. People that say just randomly HBAR can never get to, and they pick a dollar price. That's phony and false. And people that say that there is a market cap constraint on the price of HBAR, it's also phony, because because you'd be arguing that some nominal market cap is more important than the real yield you could get from the network. And I'm going to write something up on that. There's a blog on here where I get to write my thoughts and opinions, and something I enjoy. But I'm going to add something on that topic. But that's essentially the valuation model.
That's amazing.
And it's interactive, so anyone can play with it and make their own assumptions and scenarios and get themselves excited.
I love that. It's a learning tool. It's a learning tool, I think, both for the community, for HBAR investors, but as people have kind of highlighted in the comments, also, potentially the governing council and some of these folks that, in many ways, need to get on the same page. It's the one thing that we can't argue is the fact that just as an ecosystem and as a community, we're just not on the same page with a lot of things, whether it's due to, again, a lack of transparency, differing opinions, whatever it may be. A tool like this at least gets us on in the same book, maybe in the same chapter, and I think that's a start, because for a very long time, things have felt very, in not a good sense, decentralized, you could say. Yeah. So I'd like my mind to become less decentralized for a bit as we kind of really dive into this. But I think that, we've been talking for about an hour here, and I really appreciate your time. And I just had a couple more questions, kind of just, packing this all up. But this is just an incredible conversation. I think a lot of people have found it valuable. We've got a lot of great comments. So, it's clear that the Hedera ecosystem has grown. HBAR investors, as I said before our interview, are really getting more and more hungry for these kind of tools as they've had a bit of a taste now. And looking back, we didn't really have many analytics tools. And now looking forwards, what impacts do you think platforms like Hashpoint are going to have on this ecosystem?
What I hope is that HBAR holders just become more, they get the perspective and context and more knowledgeable about the asset and the dynamics. And again, you don't have to agree with. I mean, you can look at. I encourage anyone to play with the model and poke holes in it and tell me where it's wrong. And same with the the HBAR bull said, yeah, I think I kind of disagree with your opinion on the staking APY and its correlation to the HBAR staked. And it's like, I want to have those discussions. I want to be able to engage and not just throw spitballs at people in Reddit. It's
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's a lot more fun to have a loaded, to have a discussion around, with that context. So that's what I think the analytical tools do. I think that's what the platform does. I think it's what, your show does, and the HBAR Bull. I mean, it provides perspective and content, and this is just another piece of content for the community.
Right.
And I just, I hope it just provides, I hope it makes people more knowledgeable and comfortable, and you don't have to like the staking APY at 0.2, but maybe you've got some understanding of maybe why it's there, and what the governing council's thinking is on that. Again, you don't have to like it, but at least you can be disgruntled and informed as a person.
That's what I should have called this episode: disgruntled and informed.
I mean, I guess that's what I'm looking for, is to create more disgruntled and informed.
I love it. I love it. Disgruntled and informed. I love it. I mean, the other thing too, like, it's really been cool to see the story of Hashpoint kind of unfold, especially in the last few days, like just seeing you guys like blow up on social media and just everybody kind of embracing the platform. I think it's so great. Are you, obviously you are, but like, new features, are there bigger visions in play? What can people look to for the future for Hashpoint?
Well, certainly new models that are relevant. I don't want to. I want the site to be usable. A touch point. If it gets too cluttered with transactions segmented by node 16. I mean, no,
you can have too much information.
It just becomes clutter, and you lose focus. So, but as the network changes, I mean, there's right now there's no use case section on the platform. That's kind of under development. But right now there's only one use case, so one that really matters. But as those come on, the platform will change. The blog, the insights section is, my background. I've written investment research for 20 plus years. So that's what that's for. And, I'd like to, if I can, like talk to Max Winograd, and really, not talk to him about, the, Atma and how many transactions we can expect and that kind of thing.
Right.
But really kind of get into the, the nuts and bolts of
the whys.
Yeah, whys. Some of the stuff we don't know, that we should know, that again would provide more information for your disgruntlement. Yeah.
I love that. The disgruntlement informed equilibrium is what we have to maintain. And if someone is watching this and they're like, oh my God, I've got to get my hands on this stuff, I got to dive into Hashpoint. How can they get full access? How can the community get involved?
Well, the dashboard is free, and we, because data isn't free, it costs money to run the site. We tried to price it so that it was as accessible to anyone, and if there is anyone who wants access and can't afford, it's $10 a month if it's for an annual subscription. But if there's anyone who can't afford that, I mean, just reach out and we'll set you up. But the idea was to make it affordable enough and accessible enough to everybody.
Right on. I mean, it's a Netflix subscription at this point. If you can get your Netflix, you
without
can get
the ads.
yeah, without the ads. There you go. I love it. I love that. Like this is so valuable. And this is, again, just zooming out a little bit. One of the things that I love about Hashpoint, and again, being in the data business myself at Hgraph, and you guys really being a part of our ecosystem, is like, this is what I've really wanted to see, both from a higher level, which is really novel products and services that cost $10 a month that people in this ecosystem can afford and use, that gives them value. That's something that is so important for me to see, because it's not just like Hashpoint is this giant conglomerate that focuses on a bunch of other networks and stuff, and Hedera is like a spoke in their wheel. This is a project that's emanating from within the Hedera ecosystem, from a group of intrinsically motivated HBARbarians with this tool. And furthermore, it's on the data side, right? This isn't about putting transactions into the network, which we talk about a lot. It's about the other half of this network. My business, mirror nodes, data. I'm so passionate about this. So huge kudos to you guys. And just, it's so refreshing for me to just see use cases like yours, where it's like, hey, it's a monthly subscription, get a bunch of value. It's so easy for people to understand. And it's so cool because it's designed by HBARbarians for HBARbarians. Yeah. And many people said it couldn't be done. Here it is.
Yeah, and you guys, I mean, you guys have been above and beyond. I mean, great to work with. I mean, when we wanted data and we couldn't access it, within a day, there's an API for us to go get
Right
that
on.
data. And in terms of the launch, you guys have been, again, terrific partners.
I think, we're just trying to live up to the standards of this community. I think we find that everywhere. As soon, like a message to anyone curious about building on Hedera, sure, the ecosystem might be a bit smaller. Sure, we've got our problems. Brian and I have been whining about it here for, an hour, but it's such a welcoming community. It's such a vibrant community, an informed community now. And I think that when you get in here, you just find that helping hands are everywhere that you look. And that's what really this is about. I've had the same treatment in the ecosystem. So it's just really just about paying it forward. So it's been an absolute pleasure helping you guys kind of break into the ecosystem and use our data. That's what it's there for. So I love it. So was there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get a chance to? I know this interview has been more just like a conversation.
I think we touched on more than I planned on, but
right on.
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of ground, and it was well worth it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brian. Well, great to have you on the show. I'll have you back for sure. And everyone check out Hashpoint, and yeah, really appreciate the time, Brian. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.
Right on. So Brian, what a fantastic conversation. This is one that I think we're going to be having more of in the future. I hope. As we were talking about on the show, this is really something that is new for this ecosystem, something that people have really wanted, and something that we haven't really had for a long time, right? Information, data, transparency, analysis, and not, again, like, Brian also really makes a great point is, sure, we've got all the information that this network generates, but it's in massive databases in Hgraph's servers in data centers and stuff like that. When you look at it, it makes no sense. It's just trillions or billions and billions of rows in a database. How do you compute that? How do you deliver that? How do you make access to it? How do you present it in a way that people can understand, that's useful enough to pay $10 a month for? That's what this is really about. And so for me, this is, I hope, a major trend that's going to be continued, because when we have more information, we get more power, right? That's what this is about. Information is power. And when this community gets more power, we have more control over how this network grows and moves. And as we've seen, the community, although it's messy sometimes, and although there's a lot of debate and argument per se, it's fun, it's lively. And going forward, we're going to be doing it from an informed place. We will be both disgruntled and informed. Coinman, the HBARbarian comments, integrate drop micropayments. Hey, there you go. Hashpoint. Drop micropayments. Drop is a great use case too. There's so many. You think of Hashpoint, and then you expand out from there. I think about what Saucer Swap was talking about earlier this year about their kind of pro plan and these different types of things. I know that the concept of like a monthly plan for a service is, at this point, it feels like a Stone Age concept. But again, it's one of those stepping stones. It's comfortable. It's known, you know, from a marketing standpoint. You know, oh God, my Stream Deck died again. Hold on. I have these buttons that I use to change my camera, because I used to do it with my keyboard and it was like just a nightmare. Sometimes this thing like glitches out. It doesn't work. And there we go. Beautiful. You know, when I talk about it from, died again, whatever. From a marketing background, you know, really it's about, if you're doing something innovative and breakthrough, make it feel familiar. And if you're doing something familiar, make it feel like a breakthrough. So I think we're in a stage right now where it's like, clearly this is a breakthrough. Let's see what we can do to make it feel familiar to many people, so they will use it, because that would be great. But thanks again for Brian for stopping by the show. That was a great conversation. Now, we have a couple more things to chat about. And it is a couple very interesting things, some major use cases and some potential, kind of breadcrumbs, what could be coming, up in the air kind of stuff. Very exciting stuff. But anyways, first thing is USDS. So what is USDS? Well, USDS is a new stablecoin that's coming to market from BitGo. And you might recognize BitGo from places such as the Governing Council. What does this mean? BitGo is doing a stablecoin. Seems like a bit of a nightmare, but it's not. Trust me. USDS, first of all, I think it's great. US dollar. It's like we have USDC, right? Circle US dollar. We have USDT from Tether. But USDS, you think it would be like USDB for BitGo, but USDS is kind of like the US dollar stablecoin. From a branding perspective, it, I don't know. I dig it. But why is this interesting? So it's not just another stablecoin. This is a stablecoin that's designed differently from an architectural standpoint that I think is going to be very interesting. So the CEO of BitGo, Mike Belsch, says, a stablecoin's true value comes from the people using it, the liquidity they provide, and the access points for interchange, right? So when we're using USDC and USDT and all these different types of things, it's not just how much is there and what it's backed by. It's how is it being used and how are those liquidity providers being rewarded. With USDT and USDC, a lot of the yield on those assets that back the stablecoin aren't really shared, I don't believe. And this flips the script a little bit on that. So this is also, it's backed by short duration treasury bills, overnight repos, cash, similar to other stablecoins on the market. But it will be what BitGo calls the first open participation stablecoin. So there's a bunch of info contained in this article, but I'll just kind of rattle off a few excerpts. So at the end of each month, we generate some, and this is again, the CEO of BitGo, Mike Belsch speaking. At the end of each month, we generate some return from the cash being held in the underlying fund, and we will pass it back to the participants on a pro rata basis based on their custody of the asset. Interesting. And in the article it says, while this might sound like it's treading dangerously close to being a dividend and thus classifying the whole operation as an investment contract, Belsch says the difference lies in that it's not distributing the proceeds to the end user, but rather to the institutions providing the liquidity. So, right away you're an institution and you have a choice of providing liquidity in the form of USDC and USDT and USDS. You kind of go, well, USDS seems attractive because we'd kind of be earning a yield on it. So it already there's an interesting component to this. Now, it's worth noting other stablecoins have tried creating yield-bearing stablecoins and rewarding end users, but as a compromise, they've needed to exclude the US from the available markets. So that's the downside of doing it right to the end user, right? So you either keep all the rewards for yourself, send the rewards to the end user, or what BitGo is doing is they're like, well, what if we resided somewhere in the middle of that chain? Maybe. So this is another quote from CEO Mike Belch. You end up with either folks that opt into only the US market and then the folks that opt into only the non-US market, like Mountain Protocol or Lyft Dollar out of Dubai. They can't sell in the United States because they are a security. So that's really what this is about, is this is a new stable coin that is, as they've kind of said, the first open participation stable coin with rewards going down the chain, not all the way to the end user, but it creates a bit of a different dynamic that gives it some differentiation amongst other stable coins. What was interesting and maybe disappointing is they've got a cool website, right? The USD standard open participation stablecoin, blah, blah, blah. They had a bunch of copy and information about this how this is split, how it works, and how it works in comparison to other stable coins. The website doesn't have it anymore. I don't know why. I don't know where it would have been on the site, but now all it has is a wait list. So I was kind of bummed because we could dive into it. It does a great job. Anyways, I think I covered most of that. But obviously, the real question on the minds of HBAR barians everywhere is, what does this mean for Hedera? Because in these announcements, and again, this is set to launch January 2025. So 4 months from now, 5 months from now, very close. And nowhere in these announcements is Hedera referenced or mentioned. So you start to think immediately, which network or networks is this stablecoin going to be minted on? And will Hedera be one of those networks? As we know, USDC is available on Hedera native, right? USDT is available on Hedera as a wrapped asset. So there is stablecoin stuff happening on Hedera, which is great, but our stablecoin liquidity is abysmal, right? You've got billions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of stablecoin liquidity in other networks like Ethereum, Solana, etc. Hedera is down at the bottom with under 10 million, which is very small and limits the ways in which enterprise and other use cases can use the Hedera network. So it's a big metric that we don't talk about in the ecosystem a lot. And it's so important. And so you go, okay, BitGo is doing a new stablecoin. Great. They're a Hedera governing council member. Cool. As we know, BitGo is definitely one of the more forward-thinking, engaged Web3 native governing council members. Great. Is BitGo going to bring liquidity to the Hedera network and possibly mint USDS on Hedera? That is the question that remains unanswered. Now, obviously, it makes sense. It would be incredibly weird and incredibly disappointing to have a governing council member like BitGo, mint USDS on other networks and not mint it on Hedera. That'd be crushing, to be honest. But I would be surprised if they did that. I'd be very surprised if they did that. It makes sense to me that Hedera would at the very least be one of the networks that BitGo mints a native USDS token on Hedera, and would strengthen this ecosystem where we have a governing council member that enables a stable coin in our ecosystem. That would be a very powerful tie-in for the governing council to have. So the question then boils down to, how important is stablecoin liquidity to the governing council? I think the answer is not enough, of course. Not enough work has been put into enabling, for example, Circle, right? USDC liquidity on the network. This stuff takes funds. You got to put your money where your mouth is. And we don't even know if Hedera's mouth is talking about stablecoin liquidity. Is it a priority? We don't have a strong signal for that. But what we do know is that the facts, the numbers show that it is important. It's existentially important for Hedera. So that's what I've got going in my mind right now. There isn't a lot more to go off of, but all we know is kind of three things, right? Stablecoin liquidity on Hedera is existentially important for the network in so many ways, not just DeFi and retail, but enterprise. BitGo is launching a new differentiated stablecoin product, USDS, and BitGo is a governing council member on Hedera. Can we close the loop? Can we make something happen? We'll have to see. But I hope that that we will see. So that's USDS. I am very excited about it. And we'll be following that story closely. Now, I did want to touch on quickly Hedera Hackathon, for those unfamiliar, starting in August into late September. Hedera ran the Hello Future Hackathon. They had over 2,000 submissions, and they had 84 projects make it to the finish line. Hackathons are not easy. Hackathons are not easy, guys. Especially one that's a month long. The stakes are high, and there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of pressure, and the judges are, comprised of governing council members, all these different types of things. So not easy. So I think that, 84 projects submitting to this Hedera Hackathon is a decent yield. I think that it definitely grabbed the attention of the ecosystem, especially some of the winners. And I just wanted to kind of take a minute here and just kind of go through this post that Hedera published on the Hello Future Hackathon and some of the winners. So there was over $350,000 US worth of prizes available for winning teams, including, some Google Cloud credits and all sorts of different stuff. There were several different tracks, including AI, DeFi, real world asset tokenization, beginner tracks, advanced tracks. And, there was Q&A sessions, different activities along the way. It was, obviously, I'm at Hgraph. We participated in the hackathon. It was great, but let's just take a quick look at the winners. So the first place overall winner, right? Overall is there were, again, the different tracks within the hackathon, and you had different submissions within the different tracks. And then depending on who was winning those different tracks, they would become an overall winner. So the overall winners were Savera, a blockchain wallet platform focused on underserved communities. So that was very cool. Nomad, second place overall, which we know Milan from the ecosystem and community, and the HBAR founder. I was talking about him earlier in the show about his panel that he had with Lehman. So second place, well deserved. And he posted to X recently, very unfortunate aspect of Milan's experience in the hackathon was, during the hackathon, his dog got very sick. And then after the hackathon, just days after, his dog ended up passing away, which is, I've got my dog right here. I love her to bits, Georgia. And so it's just crushing to hear stuff like that. And it really speaks to how, really powering through something so emotionally taxing and difficult and life-changing as, a pet getting ill during a hackathon and being dedicated and really pushing it to second place. The motivation, the dedication, this deep into this ecosystem is just incredible. And I think Milan is a great example of somebody who embodies that intrinsic motivation, somebody who is so dedicated to this ecosystem through thick and thin. And just so condolences to Milan about his dog, and congratulations on the win. Second place, well deserved. Third place, Credor revolutionizes trade documentation with secure and compliant digital solutions, focusing on MLETR compliant electronic bill of lading and tokenization. So very, very cool stuff. And single team member, right? So some of these had multiple team members, right? This one had quite a few. Single team member, a single person pulling third place. So huge congrats. That's awesome. Track winners. So the AI track, Osminium Labs, a Hedera AI chat interface. So this is really, really cool. You can, perform complex interactions with natural language. So very, very cool stuff. Kanban 3.0, end-to-end project management tool, leading up right to payment and delivery. So this is really cool when it comes to, getting a project, planning a project, managing it, but then going the extra mile afterwards. And how do you actually pay for it? So that was very, very cool. Bitflipper, combining AI and blockchain, secure, transparent quizzing, which is important. I mean, when you're doing quizzes in any capacity, being able to verify, lock that in, potentially deliver rewards for those quizzes, really needs, you need AI for that. Acor, shout out to Acor, Jim Nasser. HealthGuard AI integrates AI with blockchain for trustworthy health predictions, an immutable audit trail. I mean, Acor has been in the ecosystem for so long, and it's so exciting to see them participating in a community hackathon. It's great. Like, this is, again, a highly motivated space. And then we've also got Verify, right? AI, Verify. I think it's pretty cool. So shout out to those 5. RWA tokenization, ZenHash. This is a bridging use case. So bridging digital assets and daily microtransactions on the Hedera network, empowering users to convert HBAR into a different cryptocurrency, which is a stablecoin backed by the Indonesian currency. So really, really cool. Credor, right? So this is also the 3rd place overall winner. Hugo, which is a blockchain lending application. Borrowers and lenders, right? This is right down the heart of what we need in DeFi and real world asset is borrowing and lending. Very, very important. Osminium Labs, also an AI track winner. We already touched on them. You could submit to multiple different tracks. Little Tarzan, I believe this is Little Tarzan from Saucer Swap. If it is, I wasn't familiar that they submitted to the hackathon. So shout out to Little Tarzan. HTS 1400 is a Hedera implementation of the Ethereum ERC 1400 security token. Very interesting and relevant because that is relevant to the asset token or asset tokenization studio. So very interesting stuff. The DeFi track, right? Nomad already talked about them. Severa already talked about them. Hashpress Pioneers. This is a integration with WordPress for payments. I imagine maybe similar to Drop. So very cool. We really need stuff like this. This is really great to see. ZenHash also touched on them in the real world asset tokenization. And Commodity, great spelling. I'm always a fan of quirky spelling. Again, supply chain stuff. Really, really important. Really dig it. Trailblazers, advanced track, Nomad, already touched on them. Again, Nomad submitted to different categories and placed in various different ones and 2nd overall. So huge shout out to Nomad. Gemio, enhancing information exchange in the industrial machinery sector, and incorporating digital twins. So physical objects, digital tokenized objects, connecting them together. I think of Twigital. I think of so many other different use cases. And then, specifically in this industry and machining, I've got a very good friend I actually had a great call with yesterday in the machining industry. So this stuff is very cool. And Hgraph, not to toot our own horn, but 3rd place, Trailblazers track, with the revenue dashboard that everyone's familiar with, hederarevenue.com. I'll just give maybe let's take a look at the revenue for the network right now. With Atma in the last hour, $946 worth of revenue. Without Atma, $39 so far within the last hour. With Atma in the last 24 hours, 23 grand revenue via transaction fees. $1,300 without in the last 24 hours and just over the last week. We've got just shy of 10 grand worth of revenue generated for the Hedera network via transaction fees without MIOO and with $160,000. So, Hgraph, third place, Trailblazers. Shout out, and a huge shout out to Tyler McDonald at Hgraph, our CEO, who I developed the revenue dashboard with. It was just a blast. I really dug it. And Hashauth in fourth place, single sign-on and know your customer provider for Hedera. Very important, very cool. Rod Da Silva, Hedera P2P, provides a glimpse at what's possible with the consensus service and peer-to-peer. Really, really great stuff. This is the beginner's track. Shout out to Rec 081, Solo Explorer, Launches, VidChat, Stray, Project Alpha, Dreamers, Verified, TicketByte, and Solo. This kind of stuff is so cool because these are people just getting started out for the first time on Hedera via a hackathon, getting a little bit of money. And I just love that stuff. I think it's great. This was, to be honest, this is one of my first hackathons. So this was just a great experience. And shout out to all of the participants and everybody who entered into this hackathon. And a quick plug for Genfinity, because I'm so excited about this. They're doing there's multiple parts, I think. I think this is true. This is the first one, and then there's going to be multiple installments of this. The first will be on September 30th, so next Monday, I believe. And this will be a live show connecting with the winners of the hackathon, the overall winners, including Milan. So this is going to be really great. September 30th, 9 a.m. Eastern. Tune in for that. I'll be definitely tuning in. And they're going to be doing more of these. So keep an eye on Genfinity for all of the kind of like hackathon stuff that we have yet to kind of unpack and recap and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really great. And let me see if there's anything else we had to touch on. I think we got to everything, which is great. And thank you everybody for staying tuned in. 2-hour show. That's how long this show lasts. It's funny because I've got really good at getting the news done in 30 minutes, just shy of 30 minutes. Sometimes like this week, there's still more to do after the fact. Getting better at it. And the interviews, they take time. I really enjoy chatting with people with these unstructured conversations. You never know where they're going to go. And so, chatting with Brian today from Hashpoint was great because, sure, he's got a new project out and people are excited about it and all these different types of things. But, when you actually speak with people who are behind these projects, there's so many other conversations to be had because I try to remember with this show, it's not just about talking about the project. It's talking with an HBARbarian, right? And it's just a chance for me to, I don't know. Sometimes the best value I get from this show, and the reason I'm so lucky to be doing it, is it really puts me in a place where I can just really reach out to whoever I want. That's the whole point of the show. I talk about things I'm interested in and excited about, and try to represent what's on the community's mind through the show around those things. And, I'm just so grateful to have the show because it puts me in a place where when something important happens, I can just reach out to someone and say, hey, you want to come on the show? And most of the time they're like, sure, great. And sometimes they reach out to me and it's like, hey, I'm down to hop on the show. Let me know. And it's just, I don't know. It's a dream. It's really great to chat with these people and do it live, right? That's the other thing, is not just pre-recorded stuff, but really doing it live, I think is really, really great. Quick shout out. If you want to support the show, you can send HBAR or different tokens to account 0.0.1725506. It helps the show. Send it to the wallet, and then I sell it and pay for stuff like the StreamYard subscription and different equipment that I have. And, I spend a lot of time on each of these episodes, at least a couple hours, prepping, preparing, doing the show. I say a couple hours, more than that, because then after do the clips and do all this stuff. But anyways, support the show. It's really appreciated. The Hedera wallet is, again, 0.0.1725506. Greatly appreciated. And a great way to, to support for free is, give me a follow on X, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It goes out to those places. The show is live every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And after the fact, it's available also on podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple and Google and all those different types of things. And the website, it's back in fighting shape. I know I haven't talked about the Hashgraph enthusiast website for a bit, just because, to be honest, I was embarrassed by it. I was moving to a new platform. I was getting stuff set up. I've been so busy with Hgraph. So I'm happy to say the new website is coming along. We've got the latest episode at the top always. You can dive into each of the other episodes, support the show, call into the show, different links to different areas, ways to support. You can get the wallet address there to support the show. So you can get that at hashgraph.news. So yeah, head over to hashgraph.news and get all your Hashgraph enthusiast stuff. Yeah, really great week. Lots of stuff happening. And a great conversation with Brian from Hashpoint. I think what all of this is really about is having the information we need, the solid ground we want to have debates, to have arguments, to have disagreements in this ecosystem, to have that context. Because if we can do that, we can really move forward in a healthy way. And so check out Hashpoint. Dive into that stuff, hederarevenue.com. Really appreciate you guys. Hello, future. Goodbye, past.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.